more example I want to share with you is the Kobayashi Maru. And if you are a Star Trek fan, this might sound familiar. So in Star Trek, the Kobayashi Maru is a character test. If you want to be a Starfleet captain, you have to go through it to see how you react in unwinnable circumstances. So we did start by taking a look at Captain Kirk in the 2009 edition of Star Trek, played by Chris Pine, I believe, and directed by J.J. Abrams. Great watch for sure. So what we use that for is to look at what is character. You know, why would you put your trust in someone who's supposed to be a leader? Can you see if they have patience or not? What do you do, or how do you discover if someone has a short temper or if they're trustworthy? To be 100% honest all the time, or can you lie 49% of the time, and that 51% of honesty does the trick and makes you a truthful person? So all of these things were sort of the place that we started. We were walking and talking about these questions in the classes that I use this assignment in. So a lot of fun to sort of have those conversations happening and students taking positions there. The containers that we used for this were quite varied. So this was a fairly major project. We used crowdsourced annotated bibliography, so there was reading and writing happening there. We did some visual representation, and so there was viewing, and then there was also presenting and speaking about those pieces that they had developed. And then we had an individual reflection that we did as a written piece, but it could have been a video. So there's a lot of ways to bring in all of these different containers and give students who may not shine in one container area a place to shine in another. So the nice thing with that is they're getting a lot of practice, still developing their ideas. All of those front matter skills that you're working on in every course are coming into play, but how they can show you their learning with that variety in mind creates a little bit more success, and they might be more willing to put some of the flex time into the containers that are not their strength, because they know that some things will feel more like flow and more like fun because it's not all going to be writing. So this was quite a major project. We were thinking about, okay, what is it to have your character tested, and looking at the example of Captain Kirk and his, the movie starts off, his father saves 300 lives in the 10 minutes he's a commander. And then this is the legacy he hands down to his son, who's being born at the same time. So years later, we flash forward into the future, and here's James Kirk being tested again and again and again. And really, we see that the things that at face value might appear to be his weaknesses are actually often strengths, with his rebellious spirit and willingness to take really an interesting case study. But we didn't stop there. We could have just stayed in that upper half learning zone, but the growth zone is about producing and making these products and using these containers for our own text creation and our own production. So what we did with this afterwards is we developed our own character tests. So what is it to test character? We went back to that values page that I mentioned earlier. You can Google personal values and you'll get a whole variety of different PDF forms or visual forms that'll give you a big list. I do recommend Brene Brown's, but that's going to be in my annotated bibliography. So with the Kobayashi Maru, they had to choose a value to test: trust, anger, truthfulness, honesty, something like that. And then they designed these tests with whatever apparatus they wanted to use. We had a whole discussion about ethics and thinking about, what kinds of tests are okay, what do we do to humans. We did not actually do or execute these tests. We could have if we had decided we wanted to have some ethical guidelines, but with the decision to let those go, I had students just, hypothesize about these tests and not necessarily carry through that whole prototype and execution stage. So you can see some of the results here. We had a lot of tests that were about torturing each other. A lot of different kinds of tests. There were, you're going to have your leg chopped off if you don't push the button to help the other person become, free from electrocution in the electric chair. That was quite an interesting one to unpack. But some groups were looking at some simple things like, okay, there's $100 bill on the ground. What happens? What do people do? Will they take it? Will they give it back? All kinds of different things. Given the chance to take revenge, would you take it? How groups groups would make this available as a possibility to their subjects and see what they choose. So by the end of this, even though we didn't execute these tests, students, as they presented, the real takeaway here, students really recognize that the things that challenge us aren't usually this explosive, exciting version of testing your character in a Saw-like setting or something like that, but instead those little small decisions that you make day to day and how they reveal who you are and the choices that you make. So that was a really interesting takeaway, and it definitely set the tone for what we went into as we went through the semester. But it also created some really interesting empathy for people who make bad choices. Maybe that's not who you are all the time. Maybe you had a terrible day or a terrible week or terrible month, and that's just what you're able to do at that moment, but it's not who you really are. So it created some nice empathy. We definitely had a lot of communication as we were developing these prototypes. And one thing that became very interesting was one group had 4 members, and one of the 4 really was very adamantly against having a physical prototype of their design. So she did not participate at all in making the thing, which they made in a shoebox, like a little diorama. On the day of, it came time to present, and she realized, oh no, I deleted our Google slideshow. So what they ended up doing was using the physical prototype to direct their presentation, and it ended up being the thing that saved them. Talk about a real life character test. So that was a lot of fun just to see that play out in real life, in real time. And we wouldn't have gotten there if we stayed in that learning zone and not moved into that growth zone and executed some of these ideas in various forms and with limitations in mind.